The Institute of World Affairs at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee presents International Focus, a weekly discussion of the people and events behind today's global headlines. Support provided by Milwaukee Public Television and the UWM Center for International Education. Now here's your host, Doug Savage.
Welcome to International Focus. Depending on your frame of reference and the number of gray hairs on your head, Morocco may evoke images of Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman at Rick's Cafe, dark tales of Paul Bowles' Tangiers, or a fondly recalled backpacking trek through Marrakesh before you settle down and finish that MBA. The current reality in Morocco is perhaps a bit less romantic. With double-digit growth in sectors such as aerospace and auto manufacturing, the nation is working to build a diverse 21st century economy that can serve as an entry point to the African continent and beyond. Trade agreements with the U.S. and EU are further integrating Morocco into the global economic landscape. Challenges, however, remain. Unemployment, poverty, and illiteracy remain high, and the nation has not been completely insulated from the political turbulence in the region. Our guest today keeps a close eye on where Morocco may be headed. Jean AbiNader is Executive Director of the Moroccan-American Trade and Investment Center, which promotes closer economic, political, and security relations between Morocco and the United States. He has more than 30 years of experience as an advisor to U.S. and international companies, organizations, and agencies, with specific expertise in international business and public affairs in the Arab Middle East. Jean AbiNader, welcome to International Focus.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, a few years ago, the IMF released a report in which it called Morocco a pillar of development in the region. So why is that the case?
If I remember correctly, that was in 2008.
It was.
What was very interesting at that time, if you remember, the Eurozone was collapsing after the financial collapse in the U.S., and what that did was it forced Morocco to think about where is it going to do business, because it was very clear that Europe wasn't going to recover quickly. And 60% of its investments came from Europe and 70% of its business came from Europe. And so the king decided that it was time that Morocco went back to its roots and started developing business opportunities in Africa. And so to do that, you have to have an infrastructure. And this is what the IMF is talking about, is that starting in the late 90s, they started with banking reforms. They had restructuring of the financial system. They had monetary reform. And then they started building under the King Mohammed VI an infrastructure of telecommunications, good roads. Air service was extended to many, many cities. So it was a big plus that was verified by most international agencies that said, okay, Morocco, you're on the right trail, but keep going.
Well, before we go any further, let's take a look back, and that was not necessarily always the trajectory. So let's start all the way back in 1934 with the Treaty of Fez. Morocco becomes a French protectorate, and where do we go from there?
Let's go back to 1777 when Morocco became the first country to recognize the United States. And Morocco still talks about that all the time. And so Morocco, although was, as you pointed out, under the so-called protection of the French, it really had a much broader outlook, which it couldn't pursue because it's a poor country. It's one of the few countries in the Middle East and North Africa that doesn't have hydrocarbon resources, at least not yet. And so when the French came in 1934, what they primarily did was try to turn it into an agricultural food basket for the French economy. And they fought a lot of wars. They finally subdued the Rif and the Atlas Mountains. And it was as usual, a mixed blessing. On the one hand, they helped unify the country against them. So that helped unify the country. But also they introduced agriculture and land ownership, which was not in tune with the culture itself. And so that really left its mark on Morocco. And the other thing that happened is, I don't know how familiar you are with educational systems in the region, but you did mention the high rates of illiteracy. The French system of education is, in those days, is almost as bad as the traditional Islamic system. In a sense, it's based on memorization and marshaling facts and ad nauseum argumentation, and it's not a very effective educational system for creating risk takers or critical thinkers or people who want to learn skills. And so Morocco is paying the price for that today, both in terms of restructuring its economy so that agriculture doesn't really drive it as much as it did then, and also trying to restructure their educational system so that they really are training people for jobs and for careers as opposed to being able to read history books and feel very excited about it.
So talk a little bit about that period, sort of independence comes along after, as you say, a protracted struggle in '56.
Right.
And so what was the sort of overarching plan for the economy and for the country generally in that first post-independence?
Well, it's very interesting how independence came around. The French like to have malleable clients running a country. And so it was Sultan Mohammed V, who was the grandfather of the current king. And the French told him, you have to do X, Y, and Z. And one of the things he told him was that the French and the Vichy government during World War II, you have to round up all the Jews in Morocco. And the king said, we're all Jews here. In other words, Jews are Moroccans, and so we're all Moroccans. So you can't set aside one group from another. And that's made him very remarkable figure in the Arab world at the time. So the French got upset with him and they exiled him. And that really started the independence movement because the people then rallied around the king, and within a year, the French gave up Morocco. In '56, they brought Sultan V back, and he became ruler of Morocco in reality. In those days, the economy was really driven by agriculture. I'd say half or more of the economy was driven by agriculture. And there were large disparities between the coastal areas, Tangier, Casablanca, Rabat, Agadir, and the interior, the Rift Valley and the Atlas Mountains. So obviously the rural areas were poorer and the coastal areas had more wealth. And this is where the very poor record of education came from because it was hard to get into the interior. This is where the economic disparity came from, back to those early days in the 50s. When one realizes that Morocco imports 95% of its energy, this is a huge deficit for them in their budget. Morocco, the only reason it can really develop is it uses its resources and its good record, stability and security and open-mindedness to bring in a lot of international assistance, like the IMF said, like others. And so Morocco from about 60 to 88, 89 was very conservative. They weren't doing very much. Development was going on, but it was very much confined to the urban areas. It had a very tight political security system because they were in conflict over the Western Sahara with Algeria. And so it was a difficult period for Morocco. But toward the end of his life, in the 90s, Hassan II, who succeeded his father, Sultan Mohammed V, realized that you can't keep out the modernization of the country. So the first thing he did was he made peace with the political parties. And they had political parties from the beginning in Morocco. And recognized, in fact, the leader of the opposition became prime minister in one of his governments. So that was a big deal for Morocco, and the first in the Arab world where that happened. So he believed that by opening the tent, it would bring more stability to the country, which it did. The second thing he did was he started this reform that I talked about earlier, the banking sector, encouraging the Royal Air Morocco, the airline, to expand to other cities, to signing agreements with the European Union and the United States. So all of this was started by King Hassan II, and then his son, Mohammed VI, when he took over in 2001, really started to move that much more quickly, particularly in diversifying the economy. And so you have some interesting anomalies in Morocco. Here it is next to Algeria, which has enormous amounts of gas. Morocco only has access to very little of that gas, which goes across the northern part of Morocco to Spain through a pipeline. So Morocco has become the number one investor in renewable energies on the continent. It has the largest solar project on the continent, and they're continuing to put out even more bids on solar energy. They have the largest wind farms on the continent. They produce more voltage out of their wind farms than other maybe larger farms in terms of actual equipment. They've got a major hydropower strategy. So Morocco is really trying to say, okay, what do we have that we can use better? So they've gotten very much committed to green, to being environmentally friendly. But at the same time, they've now extended electricity to 98% of the country. 95% of all children go to primary school, which is remarkable. It was nowhere near that 20 years ago. They've extended health care throughout much of the country. So Morocco is trying, given the limited resources it has, to play catch up with countries that are more developed.
So let's talk a little bit about the trade strategy. You mentioned earlier there was a time when the vast majority of trade was conducted with the EU. Now, how has that changed?
The big difference is that the king, and I give him credit for this because, again, it's his vision, and it's a big difference because when he says this is how or what we're going to do, then it's up to this government to figure out how to do it, which is it's a good partnership. But he embarked on a number of trips throughout Africa and throughout the Middle East to start setting up not only trade agreements, but agreements around finance and human development and social projects. And so within the last 2 years, he has signed, just in Africa, not counting North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, 85 agreements with French-speaking African countries to do everything from dam construction to education. Morocco, for example, provides the largest number of scholarships to Sub-Saharan Africans of any country in the region. So the economic idea is, okay, we're going to build up our own renewable energies. And so hopefully by 2020, over 40% of their energy will come from renewables. And they've invested the money in it. They've got investors from all over the world. They have diversifying their economy. They have what's called Morocco Plan Vert, which is the Green Plan, which is a long-term agricultural development, which both for small farmers and large farmers is increasing the commitment to new technologies, which is increasing the value of irrigated land, which is diversifying the crops away from those that are water intensive. So on the agricultural side, they're moving forward. Lots of opportunities for American companies there and in renewables. Within the last 5 years, they've gotten $2 billion worth of investment from Nissan Renault in automobile manufacturing, and they're manufacturing now 290,000 units last year. It's become, within 3 years, the fourth largest component of the GDP. So Renault is there, and their capacity is 400,000 cars. Peugeot has now come in. Boeing has, so in aerospace as well as automotive, they're big. They have 3 joint ventures with Boeing. All of the major, and Bombardier is there, and the French are there. So Morocco is really understanding that they have to diversify their economy. And so one strategy is to become literally the Mexico to the United States, or the Canada to the United States, so manufacturing car pots and cables.
Moroccan maquiladoras.
Yeah, they are, yeah. And so the diversification has been very important. But with that, I think, like with the IMF and the World Bank and others, they've seen that Morocco is really working hard on this. So in almost every ranking of financial integrity of business practices, Morocco ranks very high. It's a slow process. It doesn't happen overnight because there's one, as you know, a gap between let's pass a law and then implementing the law, or passing regulations and implementing regulations. As a person who represents American companies, you know, it's much easier for an American company to go other places where they speak English than it is to come to Morocco and have to encounter French. But many more younger Moroccans are speaking English because obviously the language of the internet is English. So the more technology they develop, the more receptive they are to and more comfortable they are with using English and dealing with American companies. So there's a terrific amount of opportunity for American companies in a place like Morocco. More not only for the domestic economy, but as a platform to Africa, as you mentioned in your first remarks.
Well, let's take a look at kind of the wider political environment in which all of this takes place. But first, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back with more.
The Institute of World Affairs presents our community with a range of public programs relating to global issues, U.S. foreign policy, and the world economy. For more information about the Institute of World Affairs, call 414-229-3220 or visit our website at www.iwa.uwm.edu.
Welcome back to International Focus. We're talking with Jean AbiNader. Well, let's talk a little bit about the neighborhood now. and particularly the neighbor to the east and Algeria. Talk a little bit about the dynamic between the two countries.
We'll talk about historical. We're talking 200-300 years of history when there were no well-defined borders, and most of them were based on tribal contingencies. You know, how close are you? What are your small towns? What water oases do you control, etc. And it's ironic that along the border with Morocco and Algeria, most of the people, which were drawn by the French and the Algerians and Moroccans after World War II, after also the conflicts that they had, that all those people are related. It's very hard to talk to a Moroccan on the eastern border of Morocco and then they're not related to people in the western Algeria, and the same both ways. And so a lot of the tension between the two countries is really a leftover. It's not really, I don't think it represents the people on either side. I spend a lot of my time with young, entrepreneurial Moroccans, Algerians, Tunisians, people from the Middle East and North Africa in conferences and workshops and laboratories on entrepreneurship. Where are we going to go? Where are we going to where are we going to produce the jobs that are needed in all of our countries? And they all sit together and they talk together and they plan together. So I see the younger generation as not having the same complexes of political estrangement that their fathers and grandfathers have, and they really want to work together. And so I'm hoping that with time, that the realism of the benefits of economic integration and stronger ties between the countries will dominate or overturn the political agendas, which frankly aren't helping people on either side.
Well, and much of the processes we just discussed in Morocco probably are largely absent in Algeria because they're blessed or cursed, depending on your perspective, with hydrocarbons. Right?
Well, this is a well-documented issue. The IMF were in Algeria last month and gave them a prescription of things they need to do better. This is true of almost all of the hydrocarbon producers, that now that the cost of oil has dropped so dramatically, it's a great thing for people or countries like Morocco, which have to import all their energy because now their bills are less and their debt is less. But for countries like Algeria and Saudi Arabia and others, they really have to look at, okay, how do we restructure how the economy operates so that we can diversify it, so that we can address more of the needs of the people. And it's almost counterintuitive to not open your economy even more as a way to bring in more income, to help create jobs, to help diversify the economy, and to give young people something to do.
So, but let's talk a little bit about then back in Morocco, some of those new sectors. Aerospace, for example. How, if at the same time we said there's an issue with the educational system, where are the aerospace workers coming from?
This is really, really a good question, Doug. And I think Morocco was very innovative in this regard. What they did was, and they continue to do it every day, is the government training people, the VOTEC people, sit down with industry. So with Boeing and the other airlines. And right now they're going to move into fuselages later, but right now it's all cabling and parts and electronics and stuff like that. And the same is true in the automotive industry. The trade association, the Moroccan Trade Association for the automotive industry, sat down with the government and said, okay, these are the kinds of skills we're going to need for the next 5 years. Because obviously, when a company like Peugeot comes in and said, we want to build a manufacturing platform for 90,000 vehicles a year, they pretty much can project out what are they going to need in terms of manpower, because they have these in other parts of the world. So they say, okay, we're going to need X hundreds of engineers, we're going to need operators, we're going to need people who can do mechanical assembly. And then they design with the Moroccans a curriculum. And then so Morocco then implements the curriculum and finds, and there are plenty of young Moroccans who need jobs. So what they're doing is they're creating the jobs, the trained people in advance of the jobs coming online. So it's a great system and it's working very, very well in the automotive and aerospace industries. There are already, after only 6 years of automotive and aerospace manufacturing being there, over 300 supply-side companies there. So when you look at supply chain, there are all these smaller companies, and that's where the real job growth comes from. It's all these smaller suppliers. It's not the big companies who can use computers and robots and all that to do the work. It's all the people who have to do the much more mechanical work that has to be done. So I think that Morocco is trying to expand that model of working with industry to develop appropriate training programs to other parts of the industry as well. But it's not easy because everything costs money. And so what the government does is rather than give money to the companies to subsidize them, it subsidizes the training. So it provides the training, and then if you're, for example, if you're Boeing and you're hiring 200 people this year, the government, if it comes through a government training program, will subsidize that first year salary so that you make sure that they are the people that you want to keep on hand. They have the right skills, they have the right attitude. And so after the second year, so Boeing only has to pay half their salaries the first year, and they don't pick up the salaries until the second year. So that there are all these different kinds of innovations that are being utilized to have a real partnership between business and government.
And how is that training accomplished? I mean, is it through existing educational structure, or is this sort of one-off programs that are built?
No, they're existing educational structures, in a sense that Morocco is, in fact, last year, the first American university in Morocco started. The University of New England started a campus in Tangier. And before that, you had the English language university called El Akhwain in Afran. So they have, and so those are kind of like the pillars, okay? And then under that, they have a very robust and getting better VOTEC system, and then the Moroccan schools as well. So it's a work in progress. But the schools that feed into aerospace and automotive are literally located near the factories. And so the people are going through it all the time. But these schools are here to stay because it's an investment for the government. And obviously you can't attract more people unless you have more human resources.
And what is access like? I mean, if I'm from a village in the Rift somewhere, what are my chances of becoming an aerospace engineer?
This is a tough question because there are a lot of hoops. One is, does the existing educational system give me enough skills so that I have the language skill that's necessary, whether it's French or Arabic? Does it give me the math skills that are needed? Does it give me the science skills that are needed? And this is where Morocco is really pushing now, is to really raise the level of education throughout the educational system. And this takes time because one of the first things you need are teachers. You got to have good teachers. The curriculum you can buy off the shelf, but the teachers are key. So Morocco's investing a lot in teacher training. In fact, I noticed an article just a week ago where a Belgian company, it's a satellite communications company, is beaming satellite capacity to 4,000 more schools in Morocco. So that literally teachers can go online and do online education with their students in primary and secondary schools. What's cool about it is that it has three parts. One is the kids, of course, but the second is curriculum development, and the third is teacher training. So there are enough good examples around the world of what you need to do, whether it come from South Asia or Latin America. And the key is, okay, how do we work these in our culture? And I think Morocco is really working hard on that.
Well, we're down to our last few minutes here. What do you think would be the biggest outstanding challenges based on everything we've talked about so far?
I think closing the gap between education and employment is really important, so that you have much more of a skilled workforce, because that gives people a stake in their economy and therefore a stake in their country. I think the second thing is what we want from the United States. We want the United States to continue to support its friend Morocco. Not only the longest recognition, but we've had the longest treaty enforced with them of friendship and commerce. They are one of the leaders in the anti-ISIL coalition. They have a very extensive combating violent extremism program that they do in cooperation with us. We have the free trade agreement. There's a conference very soon in Atlanta promoting U.S.-Morocco business, and then next month there'll be one in Rabat promoting U.S.-Morocco business. I think we've got to continue to honor and support the friendship we have with Morocco, just the way they support their friendship with us.
Well, and you touched on something I wanted to be sure we talked about, and that's a training program for imams around the region.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is an innovation. An imam is a prayer leader. And even in the United States, there are no qualifications to be an imam. It's a person who is supposed to be able to read the Quran and a person who's supposed to be able to have some kind of counseling skills. There's no guarantee of that. So the king created years ago an imam training center in Morocco. And then when he was on these trips to Africa that I mentioned, they said to him, hey, do you mind if we send our people to your school? Because in Morocco, they have a thing called Maliki, the Maliki rite of Islam. It's very moderate, it's very tolerant. It has Sufi characteristics to it. And so the king has literally set up a program to train imams, prayer leaders from other countries who come in for a year or 2 years. It's a very rigorous program. And they're training men and women. And right now, it's not only 15 African countries, also France and Belgium and Holland are sending people to Morocco to be trained. So it's quite a robust program. And it's been so successful, the king has now established a school for ulamas who are Islamic scholars. And so that is on the same campus, nearby, I should say, and it will focus really on what is Islamic scholarship and how do we define Islam in a contemporary age.
Well, that will have to do it for us. John AbiNader, thank you so much for being with us. To our viewers, we'll see you next time on International Focus.
For information about the Institute of World Affairs and its many programs, or to become a member of the Institute, call 414-229-3220 or visit us at our website,